What happens when the biggest beasts on Earth run out of space and patience? This is not predator versus prey. This is predator versus predator. Elephants crushing fences, rhinos goring lions, hippos turning rivers into war zones. And at the center of it all, one tiny calf that sparks a massacre. Stay with us. The wild just declared war. In the searing heat of the African lowlands, where the air itself seems to shimmer with tension and the ground cracks like an old war drum underfoot, two colossal shadows stir. One is armored in wrinkled grey stone, a prehistoric tank on legs, its horn sharp as a javelin, eyes narrowed, flanks twitching in the sun. The other is a living fortress of muscle and memory, a bull elephant in musth, temples wet with oily rage, ears stretched like war banners, and tusks curved into ancient weapons of conquest. And between them, dust, silence, the unspoken promise of collision. There are no roars here, no fanfare, just the slow tightening of space and patience as Africa's two most formidable land titans size each other up across a disputed stretch of scorched earth. The waterhole behind them glimmers like a mirage, precious, life-giving, and now cursed with the weight of pride. These aren't accidental run-ins, not always. When giants meet, it is often not for survival, but for dominance. And the rules of this ancient arena are cruelly simple. Only one may drink in peace. It begins with a twitch, a stamp, a puff of hot wind curling around hooves like smoke from an invisible fuse. The rhino, a white male, lowers his head as if the weight of his horn might anchor him to the planet. He grunts, not in fear but in warning. The elephant's response is almost comical. A raised head, a snort through his massive trunk, and a mock charge that kicks up a veil of earth. But the rhino doesn't flinch. He is stubborn in the way only something with a hide 3 inches thick can be. And so, tension becomes kinetic. A charge erupts. When elephant and rhino collide, it is not a graceful ballet of predators and prey. It is demolition derby in slow motion. The rhino darts with surprising speed, a 2-ton torpedo in short bursts. He aims for the elephant's flank, the horn arcing upward. But the elephant is faster than he looks. A sidestep, a twist of the hips, and then the tusks come down, not in a stabbing motion but as levers, pushing, lifting, dominating. A sound tears through the air, not quite a roar, more like the splintering of trees and bone all at once. Some encounters are short-lived, a few bluffs and a concession, but others spiral into legend. In South Africa's Kruger National Park, rangers once witnessed a bull elephant lift a rhino off the ground, tusks buried beneath its belly, flinging it like a rag doll. Miraculously, the rhino survived, limping away with cracked ribs and an entirely new outlook on life. In another case, a rhino gored an elephant calf fatally, triggering a retaliatory rampage by the grieving matriarch. The next morning, rangers found the rhino's carcass trampled flat into the earth like an unwelcome rumor. But not all clashes are so clear-cut. Despite their size, elephants are not invincible. When they are young, sick, or caught off guard, even a rhino can tip the scales. A lone bull rhino, territorial and temperamental, can force a standoff with a smaller elephant, especially if he senses the elephant is unsure. And rhinos, for all their clumsy swagger, are surprisingly quick when pushed. That horn isn't just for show. It can pierce thick hide, rupture organs, and turn even the biggest beast into a collapsing ruin in moments. Yet the most surprising element in these encounters is not brute force, but psychology. Elephants, despite their size, often avoid unnecessary fights. They calculate, they test, they perform mock displays to assess their opponent's nerve. Rhinos, by contrast, are tragically poor at reading social cues. They're nearsighted, impatient, and ruled by the heartbeat. Many a rhino has found itself suddenly airborne simply because it misread a shrug for a surrender. And sometimes, the battle isn't even with each other. It's with us. Across the continent, shrinking wild spaces are forcing these titans into closer, more frequent confrontations. Where once they roamed vast ranges, now they circle tight, overlapping territories carved up by human fences, farms, and roads. A watering hole that once served a dozen elephants now must also host twice that number of rhinos. And the consequences are bloody. A clash that might have been avoided in the wild becomes inevitable in a bottleneck of desperation. But nature, as always, delivers a twist. In some regions, elephants and rhinos have been seen avoiding conflict, even tolerating each other. a drought-scarred elephant, and a battle-scarred rhino sharing space at a shrinking mudhole, both too exhausted to fight. A mutual truce, born of necessity. In rare moments, rhinos will follow elephant herds, using their paths as safer trails through dense bush. The elephant, unbothered, moves on. The rhino, ever the stubborn introvert, follows at a distance. Not friends, not enemies. Just two giants navigating a world that's becoming smaller and stranger by the day. Still, it's the battles that burn themselves into memory. The thunder of hooves across dry savanna, the crash of tusk against horn. The shocked stares of giraffes and zebras watching from the sidelines like citizens at a coliseum. These aren't just skirmishes. They are symbols. Symbols of a wild hierarchy that doesn't bend to our sense of justice or fairness. Here, power is not given, it is earned. And it must be defended, often at the cost of blood. As the dust settles and one beast limps away while the other stands triumphant but breathing heavily, the savanna resets its silence. Vultures circle, not because something has died, but because something always might. And the question lingers in the air like smoke from a distant fire. What happens when the next challenger arrives? Because in the wild, peace is temporary, and giants never rest for long. The morning fog clings to the river like an old secret, hovering just above the rippling surface, where reflections of thorn trees dance with the light. Dragonflies skate over the stillness, and birds trill lazily from the papyrus reeds. It's a scene that suggests serenity, a postcard of African calm. But beneath that quiet water lies a kind of violence so sudden, so absolute, it startles even the most seasoned predators. For here, cloaked in mud and shadow, waits a creature that does not hunt for food, but for fury. The hippopotamus, Africa's most misunderstood monster, is neither predator nor prey. It is wrath made flesh. At first glance, the hippo doesn't seem to fit the role. Its round eyes peek out like twin periscopes above the waterline, ears twitching innocently, nostrils flaring in sync with the surface. Its body, comically bulbous and smooth, floats in pods like a cluster of oversized pool floats. They yawn, they grunt, they seem to laugh at nothing. But beneath that dopey exterior lies a machine designed for violence. A male hippo's canines grow longer than a lion's claws and sharper than most predators' teeth, not for eating, but for maiming. When they open their jaws, it's not a display of tiredness, it's a signal flare. And when they charge, they don't stop to think. They simply erase whatever stands in their way. It begins with a sound, a low rumble, somewhere between a growl and a laugh, that bubbles from the riverbed and echoes down the banks like the muttering of a god. A rival male has stepped too close, or perhaps a boat, painted bright for tourists, drifts into territory the pod deems sacred. Suddenly the stillness shatters. What rises from the water is not the hippo you thought you knew, but a force of nature with murder in its heartbeat. They don't gallop, they erupt. And despite their size, adult males often weigh more than 3,000 kilograms, hippos can charge at speeds that match a human sprinting at full tilt. Underwater, they are even more uncanny. They don't swim so much as glide in bursts, bouncing off the river bottom with near supernatural agility. Watching them in motion is like watching a boulder learn to dance. It's unsettling, unfair, hilarious, until it's not. One boatman in Zambia described being chased for over 200 meters upriver, the wake behind him splitting like the sea parting for fury. Another witnessed a crocodile lifted clear out of the water by a bull hippo, its scaly body tossed like driftwood before disappearing beneath the murk. It is a well-known, if grim, fact among rangers that more humans are killed by hippos in Africa each year than by lions, leopards, elephants and rhinos combined. And yet, tourists still coo at their yawns, unaware they are watching one of nature's most efficient rage engines stretching its jaws. Territory is the obsession that rules the hippo's life. A dominant male, known as the bull, can control a stretch of riverbank teeming with females and their calves. To keep it, he must constantly fend off challengers. Battles between bulls are some of the most brutal in the animal kingdom. They don't involve the strategic wrestling of lions or the lock-horn ballet of antelope. No, these fights are face-forward, full-throttle assaults that turn rivers into frothing cauldrons. Tusks slash through skin like knives through papaya. Blood blends with mud. And the loser, if lucky, escapes with only a shredded flank and broken pride. Sometimes, however, the rage is misdirected. During the dry season, when rivers shrink into muddy veins and space becomes a cruel luxury, Hippos have been seen attacking anything that dares enter their sliver of world. Zebras coming down to drink have been mauled for the offense of existing. Lions, usually kings of this ecosystem, have been chased up trees, their roars reduced to startled barks. Even crocodiles, lords of ambush and patience, are not safe. A hippo's bite is powerful enough to crack a croc's spine like dry wood. And they do, sometimes seemingly just to remind everyone who owns the water. Yet for all their dominance, hippos are not invulnerable. In an ironic twist of evolution, their skin, though thick, is sensitive to sun and easily wounded. That's why they spend hours submerged, sweating a strange red fluid sometimes mistaken for blood, but which is actually a natural sunscreen with antibacterial properties. And despite their bulk, calves are born fragile and frequently fall victim to predators or, more tragically, to their own kind. In times of stress, dominant bulls have been known to kill the young of rival males, infanticide by testosterone. And still, there is a tenderness buried in the chaos. Mothers cradle their calves beneath their bellies, lifting them gently with their broad backs for air. They hum to each other in frequencies too low for human ears to hear, forming underwater lullabies in a language only the river understands. Females have even been observed adopting orphaned calves, a surprising flash of compassion from an animal known more for carnage than care. But perhaps the strangest fact of all is this: hippos are not carnivores. Despite their fearsome jaws, they are herbivores, grazing under moonlight on grasslands like overgrown cows. And yet in rare cases, still being studied, some hippos have been observed feeding on carcasses, even engaging in cannibalism. Whether driven by desperation, madness, or something else entirely, it's a reminder that in the wild, rules are sometimes rewritten by necessity. Nature is full of contradictions, and the hippo may be its most violent vegetarian. As the sun begins its descent, the river glows with copper light. The water calms, birds return to the reeds, and the hippos settle again, like boulders return to their proper places. The same bull who charged earlier now yawns, revealing those scythe-like teeth once more. But this time it's almost comical. The tourists, if any remain, will point and laugh, never quite believing the beast before them is one of Earth's most dangerous creatures. But the river remembers. And somewhere downstream, something moves, sleek, armored, ancient. The crocodile, patient and cold-blooded, has returned to the edge. Tomorrow the balance may shift. Because in Africa's waters, war never truly ends. It just waits. As the African sun folds itself behind the acacia trees, the savanna exhales into twilight. A copper haze lingers in the air, and the golden grasses stir with whispers of predators slipping into motion. Shadows stretch long and slow, bending around termite mounds and withering shrubs as the heat of the day surrenders to a cooler, more dangerous calm. This is lion time, the hour when patience turns to pursuit and hunger sharpens into boldness. But tonight's quarry is not the usual fare of wildebeest or zebra. Tonight something larger stirs on the wind. Giants. The lion, for all its majesty, is not built for recklessness. Unlike cheetahs that gamble on bursts of speed or hyenas that thrive in opportunism, lions work with precision, hierarchy, and ancient strategy. But there are moments, rare and desperate, when these cats look beyond their typical prey and set their amber eyes on something far more dangerous. Rhinos, elephants, hippos, creatures so massive that their very presence seems to dare the world to try its luck. And every now and then the lions do. In the heart of the Okavango, under a moon bleached white by heat and hunger, a pride moves like ghosts through the reeds. The matriarch leads, her coat dusted with age and scars that read like history. Behind her, young subadults pulse with energy, emboldened by the dry season's cruelty. Prey is scarce. The plains echo with emptiness. The usual menu has grown lean. And so a new plan festers, an ambush on the periphery of madness. Their target? A lone subadult elephant, perhaps injured, certainly lagging. Vulnerability is the only currency lions accept when hunting giants. The approach is silent, not the silence of absence, but the charged stillness of coiled energy. Grass parts in measured rhythm. Each paw lands like a prayer, soft but heavy with purpose. Lions rely on darkness not just for concealment but for courage. Their night vision, 6 times more powerful than a human's, turns the savanna into a battlefield of shadows. The elephant, half asleep near a dry riverbed, flicks its ears, trunk curling idly. It hears nothing, sees nothing, until the first lion leaps. What follows is chaos, but not disorder. One lion distracts from the front, another sinks its claws into the flank, and the rest swarm like whispers of death. But the elephant is not ready to die. It bellows, a sound that splits the air like a fault line, shaking dust from distant branches. It bucks, twists, stomps. One lion is flung violently into a tree, where it lands with a grunt and a grim lesson in gravity. The others retreat, reform and strike again. For 20 minutes, the battle teeters on a knife's edge of noise and fury. But the elephant, bloodied and trembling, manages to push uphill. It reaches a thicket, smashes through with sheer desperation, and disappears into the dark. The lions, panting and bruised, watch the brush swallow their prize. Tonight, their gamble has failed, but only barely. The youngest male snarls in frustration. The matriarch, eyes still fixed on the trees, blinks once, then turns. Tomorrow, they will try something else. Lions do not hunt giants often, but when they do, it's usually calculated. They rarely take on healthy adult rhinos or elephants. Instead, they wait for the sick, the young, the isolated. Nature's inevitable lottery losers. But the most audacious of all their attempts is the hippo. While on land, a hippo is vulnerable for brief windows, especially when caught far from the river. And it's here on the dry flats that some prides have learned to exploit weakness with surgical cruelty. In Tanzania, rangers once recorded a pride surrounding a juvenile hippo that had wandered too far from its pod. The lions didn't rush. They stalked it like it was any other antelope, waiting for fatigue to settle in. The hippo, panicked and wheezing, attempted to run, a lumbering shuffle of panic and mud. But lions are masters of exhaustion. They don't need to outrun you. They just need to make you run until you can't anymore. When the hippo finally collapsed, the lions tore into it with a mix of hunger and urgency. But just minutes into the feeding, thunder erupted from the river. The mother had returned. She was not large. She was seismic. She charged with the precision of a missile, jaws wide enough to split bone, eyes rolling with rage. 2 lions were caught mid-bite and thrown into the air like toys. The rest scattered, including the matriarch, who knew the rules well. You can kill the child of a hippo, but never within sight of its mother. By dawn, the lions were licking wounds and licking pride. The calf was dead, but so were their illusions of dominance. Still, lions are nothing if not persistent. In some of Botswana's harsher regions, they've been observed successfully killing adult rhinos, but only through carefully coordinated group attacks lasting over an hour. They bite at tendons, distract with feints, and rely on relentless harassment. A young male lion might leap onto the rhino's back, digging claws into skin as thick as medieval armor, while another darts in at the face. Sometimes it works. More often, it ends in groans, cracked ribs, and retreat. And yet, one cannot help but admire their audacity. Here are animals that weigh less than 10% of their opponents, with no horns, no tusks, no armor, and yet they dare. They dare because hunger demands it, because desperation makes generals of fools, because evolution has wired into them a paradox. Play it safe and you starve, risk it all and you just might feast like kings. Still, the price is high. Many lions limp for the rest of their lives after tangling with giants. A single swipe from a rhino can snap a spine. An elephant's tusk can gore through rib and lung like a spear. And hippos, they don't just kill, they crush. Yet the lions keep coming, because somewhere in the dust of failure lies the scent of victory. As dawn spills across the land, painting the grasslands gold once more, the predators retreat to shade. Their sides rise and fall with exhaustion, their eyes already flicking toward the next night. Perhaps tomorrow, the giants will not be so lucky. Or perhaps the lions will remember that courage too has its limits. The air is still, heavy with the scent of sun-baked soil and thornbrush. Across the open plains of the savannah, mirages shimmer on the horizon, bending the landscape into a wavering canvas of gold and heat. A cicada's hum vibrates in the silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of wind through dry grass. But deeper into the clearing, where the ground is scarred with hoofprints and battle trenches, another kind of silence rules. The silence before a storm not of weather, but of muscle, bone, and fury. Here, on a forgotten stretch of African wild, 2 shadows converge. Wide, low, armored. Rhinoceroses, ancient gladiators bred not for chase, but for collision. They meet like tectonic plates, slow but unstoppable, carrying with them the weight of millions of years of evolution and a deep-seated intolerance for competition. This is no fight over food or safety. This is a war of egos, of territory, of pride etched into horn and hide. The white rhino, broad and stately, normally known for its relative calm, becomes a creature of thunder when another male dares enter his claimed space. And when these bulls fight, they fight like mountains made angry. The first charge is deceptive. A shuffle, a snort, a lowering of the head. One might mistake it for posturing until the ground begins to tremble. Dust rises in spirals around thundering feet. The horns meet in a clash that echoes like splitting stone, a collision that seems to jar the air itself. There's no elegance here, no careful feint or strategic maneuver, just raw physics. Horn against horn, muscle against muscle. Two tanks with nerves made of fire. And yet, even in this brute ballet, there is technique. Rhinos don't simply stab and hope. They twist, thrust, angle their heads to jab at soft spots, under the belly, behind the shoulder, even the face. One particularly infamous battle witnessed in Kenya ended with a victor so bloodied that he limped for weeks, his horn chipped like shattered obsidian, his flanks torn open in pink ribbons. But he held the territory. That was the prize. Not a mate, not food, just space. And in the rhino's world, space is everything. But while white rhinos fight like brawlers in an open ring, the black rhino plays a different game. Smaller, sleeker, and far more temperamental, the black rhino doesn't charge for dominance. It charges because it can. Its reputation as one of the most unpredictable animals in Africa is not an exaggeration, but a warning. Even elephants think twice before testing a black rhino's mood. With poor eyesight and a hair-trigger temper, these animals sometimes attack shadows, birds, even safari vehicles that dare idle too long. To a black rhino, curiosity is suspicious, and everything is a potential threat. In Namibia's arid valleys, a young black rhino once charged a pair of lions sunbathing far from the kill site. The lions, taken completely by surprise, scattered like guilty children. Not because they were under threat, they weren't hunting that day, but because they understood something most of us forget. A black rhino does not need a reason. It needs an excuse. This volatility carries over into their rivalries. Unlike white rhinos, black rhinos are mostly solitary. They don't maintain herds, and they rarely tolerate neighbors. Their confrontations are less predictable and often more savage. While white rhinos might clash for minutes at a time before one yields, black rhino encounters can escalate instantly. A simple overlap in feeding routes can trigger a chase that ends with one rhino impaled, often fatally. In fact, nearly 50% of male black rhino deaths in some populations are due to these territorial fights. A staggering statistic that turns survival of the fittest into survival of the least irritable. And then there's the horn itself, a tool of war, status, and unfortunately doom, composed not of bone but of keratin, the same material as human nails. A rhino's horn grows continuously and is sharpened not by nature, but by use. Every fight polishes it, every clash sculpts it. In the wild, it becomes an extension of personality. Some curve like sabers, others jut straight like medieval lances. The horn is how rhinos speak when words fail. And in a land where actions speak louder than anything else, it has become their curse. Poachers long before predators are the real threat to these titans. In regions where rhino horn sells for more than gold, even battles won can end in betrayal. A victorious male, bloodied and exhausted after defending his land, may live just long enough to become a trophy. But even this looming tragedy has a twist. In some places, conservationists have begun to trim the horn, not for profit but for protection. A rhino without a horn, they argue, is a rhino less likely to be killed. Yet others argue it robs the animal of its dignity, its means of defense, its very identity. But dignity in the world of rhinos is not a luxury. It is earned. In dust, in scars, in the quiet way an old bull holds his ground while younger males test their luck from a distance. One such bull, known to local rangers only as Ghost, has defended the same patch of land for over a decade. He no longer needs to fight. His presence is enough. He limps from an old wound, his horn thick and chipped, one eye clouded with age. But when he walks to the watering hole, no one follows. No one dares. Even among their own kind, rhinos understand rank, not through sound, but through tension. A kind of silent politics written in body language and blood memory. They are not social animals in the traditional sense, but they are acutely aware of each other. The smallest shift in posture, the slow step forward, the angle of a horn, all of it part of a vocabulary older than words. As the sun begins to fade behind the hills, the victor of today's battle stands still. Blood trickles from a shallow wound above his leg, drying into a crusted badge of endurance. The loser, bruised but not broken, retreats without looking back. The clearing returns to silence, but the dust hangs in the air, refusing to settle, as if even the land itself knows the war is not over, only paused. Because in the rhino's realm, peace is just the breath between clashes, and beyond the thorny horizon, another shape is moving. Not grey this time, but massive and mobile. Herds in motion, tusks gleaming like ivory sabers in the last light of day. At dawn, the savannah stretches wide and golden, the light soft as silk, and the silence broken only by the low rumble of earth shifting beneath feet the size of manhole covers. A distant haze rises from the heat of 1,000 hoofbeats. This is no migration. This is a procession. A family of elephants, matriarch-led and centuries deep in instinct, moves like a living river through the acacia-dotted plains. They are calm, steady, almost ceremonial in their grace. But beneath this display of strength and unity, a storm brews, and not in the sky. Among these giants, blood runs thick, but not always warm. Sometimes the most dangerous threat to an elephant is another elephant. Within the herd, peace is a delicate dance, a performance choreographed by hierarchy and experience. At the helm, the matriarch. She is not the largest nor the strongest, but the oldest, and in elephant society, age means knowledge. She remembers where the rivers once ran, which tree fruits are safe, which valleys echo with the scent of lions. Her word is silent, but absolute. Yet even monarchs have challengers. Sometimes it's another female, younger, bolder, perhaps resentful of a wrong turn or an unlucky season. Tension starts as a shift in spacing, a snub at a waterhole, a subtle separation from the group. And then it ignites. When matriarchs clash, they do not roar or scream. They stare, they circle, they posture. Their trunks swing low, their ears flare like banners, and the air thickens with a kind of ancestral authority. It may take days, it may erupt in seconds, but when it comes, it is not gentle. The two females crash with terrifying power, tusks hooking like swords in a duel, heads slamming, pushing, testing. It's not about killing, it's about yielding. One will back down, one will lead, and the rest will follow whichever survives the ritual. But this is only one front in the civil war of elephants. The true berserkers of the clan are the bulls, the solitary titans who orbit the herd like moons around a planet. Most of the time these males are silent sentinels, content to graze or spar playfully. But then comes Must, a physiological coup d'etat. It arrives like a curse. Testosterone floods their bloodstreams at levels up to 60 times normal. Their temporal glands leak an oily secretion down their faces, their behavior twists into obsession, and their gait becomes erratic, charged with a madness only nature could deem necessary. When a bull enters Must, his very presence becomes a warning. He growls under his breath, a low-frequency vibration that can be felt more than heard. Younger bulls scatter. Even the matriarch watches from a distance. For in Must, the bull has only one mission: dominance. And if another male stands in his way, be it rival brother or former ally, the result is not a fight. It's a reckoning. In the thickets of Amboseli, one such reckoning unfolded as rangers watched in stunned silence. A massive bull named Ortu, swollen with must and fury, met his match in a slightly older male, one who had held breeding rights for nearly 4 years. Their clash was mythic. For over an hour, the two titans pushed each other across the plain, their roars rolling like thunder, tusks stabbing like ivory spears. The earth churned beneath them. Trees snapped like brittle bones. When the dust finally cleared, the challenger stood victorious, a tusk lodged deep into his opponent's flank. Ortu staggered and fell, not dead but defeated, and never seen again near the herd. Whether he recovered or wandered off to die, no one knows. The aftermath of such battles lingers. Elephants don't forget. They carry grudges like we carry grief, long, quietly, and with scars deeper than skin. A defeated matriarch may exile herself. A dethroned bull might wander for years, broken in spirit more than body. But not all endings are so clean. In times of drought, stress fractures even the closest bonds. Calves are abandoned if food runs thin. Sisters fight over shade. In one chilling observation, a young male was trampled by an elder bull during a confrontation. The conflict started not over a mate, but a fallen marula fruit. When giants are starving, the line between kin and competition fades fast. And yet, among all this chaos, there are moments of redemption so bizarre they feel fictional. In a protected reserve in South Africa, an orphaned calf raised by humans was released into a wild herd. At first she was bullied, shoved, ignored. But weeks later, the matriarch allowed the calf to walk beside her, even shielding it during a hyena intrusion. Was it mercy, recognition, or something deeper? Scientists still debate it, but what's clear is that elephants operate on a social scale both ancient and mysterious. Their rivalries may be brutal, but their bonds are just as profound. These civil wars are not just biological drama. They are ecological consequences. A dethroned matriarch might lead her splinter herd into dangerous territory. A rogue bull in Muth could flatten farmland, destroy villages, and fuel conflict between humans and wildlife. When elephants fight among themselves, the ripples reach far beyond their species. They reshape landscapes, alliances, and destinies. As twilight deepens and the herd settles near a riverbed, the victor of the latest dispute trumpets into the wind. It is not a cry of joy, but a declaration. Tonight, she leads. But tomorrow, a younger rival may test her again. In elephant society, power is borrowed, never owned. And it must be defended, not just with strength, but with memory, patience, and cunning. And beyond the trees, far from the safety of the herd, another monster waits. A territorial tyrant who respects no tusk, no bloodline, and no alliance. The sun, swollen and low, spills molten orange across the baked crust of the savannah as the land breathes out its final heat of the day. The air hangs thick with the scent of dry grass, dung, and dust. Cicadas scream from the thorny underbrush. A distant jackal yips toward the horizon, and at the center of it all, where the cracked earth gives way to murky water, the watering hole pulses like a living wound. To the thirsty traveler, it offers salvation. But beneath the surface, under a film of floating leaves and the slow spiral of bubbles, the hippo waits. Not with hunger, but with hostility. From above, the pool seems almost serene. A cluster of slick grey humps floats like stones disturbed by time, their ears twitching lazily, eyes blinking in unison. A yawn here, a snort there. The image is almost comical, like oversized bath toys that forgot to be dangerous. But this is a lie, an exquisite, deadly illusion. For when the dry season tightens its grip and the rivers wither into puddles, hippos do not become docile. They become territorial tyrants, short-tempered, cramped, and cornered. And when a creature built like a boulder is also capable of sprinting underwater, tipping boats, and cracking bone with a single bite, things tend to escalate quickly. It begins in the shallows. A kudu, lean and graceful, picks its way cautiously through the reeds, each step a whisper against the mud. Her flanks heave with thirst, her tongue flicks to the wind. She knows the stories of crocodiles that vanish beneath the lily pads, of lions that wait in the tall grass behind her. But nothing seems to stir. She lowers her head, just a sip, The water erupts, not like a ripple or a splash, but like the detonation of a bomb beneath the surface. A titanic shape, almost unrecognizable in motion, barrels upward and forward in the same instant. The kudu jerks back, hooves skidding. But it's too late. The hippo, jaws stretched wide in a grotesque parody of a grin, clamps down not to feed, but to kill. The sound is wet, final. Dust flares in the silence that follows. And then, as quickly as it began, the beast sinks back beneath the surface. The watering hole ripples gently once more, as if nothing had happened. But the reeds are red now, and the silence is different, heavier, tainted. This is the horror of the ambush. Not hunger, but rage. Hippos are herbivores, yes, but no one told them that means they can't murder for sport. When space disappears, when dry season bottlenecks entire herds into the same shrinking pool of mud and misery, hippos snap. Males clash nightly, tearing at each other with tusks evolved not to eat but to maim. Females, stressed and hemmed in, lash out at calves not their own. Crocodiles, ancient, armored, apex in their own right, are pulled from the water and flung like toys. their scaly bodies skipping once before vanishing into the bushes. And yet predators still come. The watering hole is too vital, too necessary to ignore. Lions prowl its perimeter under cover of darkness, drawn by the sounds of desperation. Hyenas cackle from the shadows, scavenging scraps or gambling on the weak. But what these seasoned killers often forget is that the rules of land do not apply here. On land, lions rule. But in the water, the hippo is king, judge, and executioner. One night in northern Botswana, rangers documented a pride of lions stalking a weakened buffalo as it limped to drink. They waited patiently for the right moment to pounce. But as the lioness lunged, something massive surged from the water's edge. A hippo, enraged by the chaos near its pod. It didn't hesitate. It didn't warn. It simply charged. The lioness, mid-sprint, veered too late. The impact sent her tumbling. She survived, barely, dragging a broken leg into the bush. For days afterward, the pride avoided the watering hole, like children who had learned the hard way not to touch fire. But fire still draws the desperate, and desperation breeds risk. In the final weeks of the dry season, the water becomes a battleground of more than just claws and tusks. It becomes a soup of feces, blood, and decay. The oxygen levels drop. The temperature rises. Disease festers in the mud. Hippos, unable to escape, marinate in their own filth. Their skin cracks. Their tempers flare. The dominant bull, once a regal guardian of his territory, now roves like a warlord in a poisoned kingdom, striking out at anything that breathes. Sometimes he even kills his own calves. A strange, savage purge that science still struggles to explain. Perhaps to reduce competition. Perhaps to vent his fury. Or perhaps because the line between order and madness thins when the water runs dry. And then there are the boats. Bright metal or fiberglass intruders slicing across sacred water. Tourists laughing too loudly. Fishermen casting nets too close. They don't see the silent trail approaching, just a slight ripple, a barely there wake. Then the explosion. A hull upended, screams swallowed by water. And beneath it all, a hippo, neither hunted nor hunting, simply defending the only thing left to call its own. Each year, dozens of humans are killed in these encounters, not because the hippo is evil, but because it does not share. Not space, not water, not peace. Still, even monsters have layers, and the hippo is more than just a brute. Mothers nuzzle their calves, lifting them gently to breathe. They hum, communicating in frequencies too deep for human ears. Their skin, sensitive and vulnerable, sweats a pink fluid, part sunscreen, part antiseptic, a self-made armor against the punishing sun and open wounds. They are paradoxes wrapped in flesh, killers who don't eat meat, tanks with baby-soft bellies, clowns who can crush you in an instant. As the rains finally come, late, violent and full of promise, the waterholes swell once more. The mud loosens, the tension fades. The hippos spread out, returning to their wider domains. Battles pause, ambushes slow, and the silence that once throbbed with menace becomes, for a moment, just silence. But in the distance, another shape approaches, not from above, but below. With stealth, intelligence, and patience, it moves not through the reeds, but through the depths. Because now, it's the crocodile's turn. As the sun crests the eastern hills, slanting rays cut through the veil of morning mist and scatter light across the trampled dirt and muddied waters of the savannah. The golden hour, they call it. That fleeting moment when beauty disguises brutality, when the thorns seem gilded, and even a pool of blood can look like spilled rubies. In this hush before the daily unraveling, the smaller predators begin to move. Not the titans, not the kings of muscle and horn, but the cunning, the quick, the thieves and tacticians. Crocodiles shift in the reeds, hyenas lope along old elephant paths, and painted wolves, wild dogs with ears like radar dishes, flicker like shadows across the plain. They are not the giants, but they are the survivors, or at least they try to be. Here, in this unforgiving theater of bone and dust, size doesn't always dictate power, but it does dictate consequence. Crocodiles, armored and ancient, rule the water's edge with a cold precision until they don't. Because while a crocodile may outlast time itself, it cannot always outmuscle an angry elephant. It's a lesson the river gives out often and without mercy. One such lesson came one dry season in the Luangwa Valley, where the shallows had become crowded with desperate wildlife. A young croc, half hidden beneath a bloom of lilies, made the mistake of surfacing just as a female elephant ushered her calf into the water. Perhaps he was testing the calf's proximity. Perhaps he was simply surfacing for air. Either way, the matriarch didn't ask questions. She turned so quickly that the river seemed to flinch. Her trunk rose once, not in warning, but in aim. And then, with a precision that defied her bulk, she drove her tusk down into the water and under the surface. What emerged seconds later was a thrashing mass of scales and snapping jaws, held aloft like a rag doll. She flung it once, a wide, looping arc that ended in silence. The croc did not return. Yet for every tragedy in this world, nature writes a counterpoint. Crocodiles are opportunists. When the giants fight, when rhinos gore, hippos maim, and lions scatter entrails across the riverbank, the crocs wait. They're not here for the chase. They're here for the aftermath. A half-eaten buffalo leg drifting downstream, the body of a fallen elephant calf left behind in the confusion, even the dismembered scraps from a lion's failed ambush, all of it spells fortune for a creature that feeds on failure. And sometimes their patience pays off not just in food, but in victory. In Botswana's Okavango Delta, researchers once watched a massive crocodile, 20 feet long, with scars like old wars etched into his hide, drag down a fully grown leopard. The cat had come to drink. It never left. Meanwhile, on land, the story is noisier. Hyenas, often caricatured as scavengers, are in truth one of the savannah's most misunderstood tacticians. They don't just feed on leftovers, they create them. Bold, clever, and almost insufferably persistent, they'll trail lion hunts like hecklers, wait out rhino stampedes, and move in when everyone else is licking their wounds. But their audacity has limits, especially when giants are involved. During a territorial clash between two male hippos near a shrinking waterhole, a pair of hyenas attempted to sneak in and snatch an abandoned carcass. They barely made it 3 meters before one of the bulls, eyes rolling with blood rage, wheeled around and charged. One hyena was crushed mid-laugh. The other learned how to sprint through thorn bush with a broken leg. Yet the most unpredictable players in this battlefield of giants are the wild dogs. Sleek, social, and eerily synchronized, African wild dogs hunt not with force but with finesse. They are the saboteurs of the savannah, attacking from angles, communicating in chirps and high-pitched squeals, never breaking stride. Unlike hyenas, they avoid the giants entirely, not out of fear but out of discipline. They read the chaos, not as threat but as opportunity. A lion pride distracted by a charging bull. That's dinner. A herd of elephants driving a leopard from a kill. That's a buffet. One morning in northern Tanzania, a pack of wild dogs intercepted a commotion between lions and buffalo. As dust clouded the horizon, the dogs fanned out in a crescent, barely audible above the stampede. While lions wrestled hooves and horns, the dogs slipped in from the side, nimble, focused, surgical. They didn't take down the buffalo. They didn't need to. They took the calves that fell behind, the wounded stragglers, and before the lions even realized what was happening, the pack had vanished. Ghosts on the wind, full-bellied and unseen. But not every gamble pays off. In Kruger, a pack was cornered between a rising river and an advancing elephant herd. Trapped, confused, and surrounded by trumpeting beasts that saw them only as pests, the dogs scattered. One was trampled, another disappeared. The rest regrouped, less one, and trotted off into the dusk. A painful reminder that strategy doesn't always outplay weight. Still, if these mid-sized predators share one strength, it's their ability to read the room. They don't challenge the giants, they dance between them. They calculate risk with every breath, using chaos like camouflage. When rhinos clash, lions charge, or elephants fall, the crocs, hyenas, and wild dogs wait at the periphery, eyes glinting with arithmetic, not bloodlust. And yet, their role is critical. Without these scavengers, these cleaners, the savannah would drown in rot. Carcasses would pile, disease would spread, balance would collapse. The giants may be dramatic, but the middleweights are the unsung keepers of order. They remind us that survival is not just about power, it's about timing. And in a place where chaos reigns, timing is everything. But timing is also fragile. And when water returns and giants spread out again, a new kind of contest begins. One not fought in tooth and claw, but in thirst and need. The land cracks first. Not loudly, not suddenly, but with a slow, sullen groan, like an old secret refusing to stay buried. The riverbeds fade to ghostly outlines, curling like scars through the dust. Grass withers to splinters. The trees, once defiant in their shade-giving green, stand brittle and bare, their leaves curled like the hands of the dying. And in this baked and breathless world, silence gains weight. Not the peace of stillness, but the tension of absence, of water, of relief, of mercy. Drought is not a singular event here. It doesn't arrive like a storm. It creeps, settles and steals, a slow attrition that hollows the savannah's soul. Pools shrink to puddles, mudholes dry to chalk, and once grand rivers become dusty suggestions. The heat presses downward like a second sky. But more dangerous than thirst itself is what thirst invites, desperation. And desperation among giants is a powder keg. In this crucible, the rules of the wild begin to warp. Elephants, hippos and rhinos, titans of territory, find themselves funneled toward the same last lifelines. Ancient rivalries that once flared at the edges of overlapping ranges now ignite in the same shrinking patch of cracked clay. These are not ambushes, not acts of predation, they are collisions. Battles born not of hunger but need, and need is more brutal than bloodlust. On a scorching afternoon in Savo, the temperature pushes past 40 degrees Celsius, and a watering hole the size of a soccer field has shrunk to a sludgy basin. Around it, tensions simmer. Dozens of elephants crowd the perimeter, mothers shielding calves with their flanks, bulls posturing with flared ears and flung sand. From the east, a rhino cow appears, her horns splintered, her gait tense. She doesn't charge, not yet, but the line she's about to cross hasn't been drawn in dirt. It's been carved in memory, a memory the matriarch hasn't forgotten. With barely a shift, the largest female steps forward. She doesn't trumpet, doesn't rumble. She moves like thunder hidden in a cloud, inevitable, invisible until too late. The rhino halts, lowers her head, and lets out a breath that puffs dust like smoke. It's a standoff of silhouettes. And then it begins. What follows is not a fight in the traditional sense. It's a storm of movement. Tusks slicing sideways, horn jabbing upward, legs crashing into earth, calves scattering and water flying like broken glass. The rhino barrels forward in a half-blind lunge, driven less by strategy than fury. The matriarch pivots, uses her weight like a battering ram, and slams into the rhino's side. The sound, wet, deep, final, echoes across the basin. The rhino stumbles, recovers, flees. No one follows. This is not a war for victory. This is war for survival. But the elephant's triumph is temporary. From the southern rise, hippos arrive. Not just one or two, but a whole displaced pod. Their skin flaking from the heat, their tempers already fraying. Out of water, they are lost things, too heavy to run, too hostile to reason. One male, still caked in cracked mud, charges into the shallows as if reclaiming a throne no one offered. Elephants trumpet. Calves scream. The basin explodes in a chaos of grey muscle and brown water. A young bull, caught in the wrong place, is bitten across the hind leg, his scream tearing through the dry air like fabric. Blood swirls into the muck. The hippo retreats. The elephants regroup. No one wins. Everyone bleeds. And above it all, the sun just keeps burning. Climate change has turned the rhythm of the savannah into something discordant. Seasons no longer arrive when they should. Rains flirt and vanish. The droughts grow longer, deeper, and more vengeful. What used to be rare, violent encounters between the largest land animals on Earth, is becoming routine. And it's not just the frequency that's rising, it's the stakes. Without water, herds don't just move, they unravel. In the southern reaches of the Limpopo Basin, a hippo calf was found trampled, not by predators, but by its own pod, crushed in a frantic shuffle to a shrinking pool. In Namibia, a rhino bull gored two of his own offspring, mistaking their approach for a challenge to his limited space. In Zambia, entire elephant families have been observed walking over 100 kilometers without finding a single reliable water source, losing calves and elders along the way, their bodies found days later by vultures who understand the new schedule better than we do. And still, amid all this, the strangest truths emerge. Species that once detested proximity now endure it in silence. Elephants and rhinos drinking within meters. Hippos sharing a pool with crocs. not in harmony but in mutual exhaustion. There's a peculiar etiquette that desperation writes. It says, fight, but not now. Hate, but later. Live first. There are flashes of humor, too, as if nature still remembers how to smirk. A young elephant, uncertain and fidgety, tries to scare off a lone buffalo, flapping its ears like a toddler playing dress-up in armor. The buffalo doesn't even blink. Further downstream, two hippos bicker over a spot in the mud, not with violence but with grumpy snorts and theatrical yawns. Even giants have off days. But eventually, even temporary truces collapse. All peace in this climate is borrowed, and sooner or later someone oversteps. A desperate matriarch charges a hippo calf. A bull rhino returns with a limp and rage. The pool dries just enough to make sharing impossible. And war returns, not as an exception, but as the new normal. As night falls, the cracked land radiates the day's stored heat like a forgotten stove. Frogs croak from somewhere underground, hoping against hope for rain. The giants, caked in blood and dust, pull back into the darkness. They will return tomorrow. Or maybe not. Maybe they'll fall along the trail like so many others. Because in this war, even victory comes with a price. And far beyond the dust and dried riverbeds, the rain finally stirs. Clouds brewing like rumors on the far horizon. But before the downpour, before the floodgates break, something else rises from the pastures. The tiny ones. Armed with nothing but instinct and the weight of destiny, they march. And they matter more than any giant. Dawn arrives not with birdsong, but with breath. The slow, foggy exhale of an elephant calf, pressing its warm body against its mother's flank in the first light. The air is cool, not yet broken by the sun, and the world feels temporarily fragile. Dew clings to the tall grass like secrets. Shadows stretch long and thin. And everything, for the briefest moment, is soft. But softness here is never safe. Because in the African wild, innocence is not protected by the rules of nature. It is hunted by them. Across these battle-scarred landscapes, calves, cubs, and pups walk not as helpless bystanders, but as sparks that ignite ancient instincts, both for survival and for slaughter. They are the smallest things, and yet they change everything. A baby buffalo's whimper draws lions from the hills. A wandering rhino calf triggers a stampede of protectiveness, and when a predator dares cross a certain invisible line, even the gentlest giant can become a creature of chaos. In the tall acacia scrub of central Kenya, a newborn elephant wobbled awkwardly through its first steps. A miniature miracle, all ears and elbows, still glistening from birth. Its mother stood nearby, still bleeding, still trembling, but unflinching. The rest of the herd formed a loose ring, pretending not to watch, but watching everything. For the first 24 hours, this calf was more idea than individual, more symbol than survivor. But then came the test. From the edge of the trees, a lioness crept forward, belly to ground, eyes locked not on the mother, not on the circle of females, but on the space between them, the empty gap, the breach. In the wild, space kills. And this lioness knew it. She'd lost her last cubs to starvation and was willing now to gamble on fury. But as she broke cover, something ancient took hold. The matriarch stepped forward, not with speed, but with such terrible finality that the earth seemed to lean away. Trumpeting like a war horn, she charged. Not a warning, but a verdict. The lioness vanished in a blur of dust and gold, her hunger postponed by a wall of tusks and rage. These acts are not rare. In fact, they define the rhythm of survival. Calves and cubs are the axes upon which entire ecosystems tilt. Mothers, otherwise passive, will flip from serenity to savagery in a heartbeat. A rhino cow, normally a ghost in the bush, once chased a safari vehicle for nearly half a kilometer. Not because it had harmed her calf, but because it might have. Hippo mothers have been seen biting other females' offspring to death, only to defend their own with suicidal violence minutes later. Even crocodiles, cold-blooded in every sense, will carry their hatchlings gently in their jaws, tucking them beneath roots or sliding them onto their backs like armored ferries. And if anything dares threaten them, that icy calm snaps. The river turns red. But there is another side to this story, one far less noble, because where there are babies, there are those who see opportunity. Hyenas are masters of identifying weakness, and they don't flinch from targeting the smallest. In fact, they seem to prefer it. A young wildebeest calf, separated during migration, will rarely survive a single night without its herd. And when a rhino calf wanders too far from its mother, and it does happen, the hyenas come not in ones or twos, but in packs, their eerie calls spiraling through the darkness like laughter with too many teeth. Yet even they risk much. A protective rhino will swing her horn in arcs so wide and fast that it slices shrubs cleanly in half. More than one hyena has been gored mid-charge, left to bleed into the dust, a warning written in red. And then there are the thieves, those who wait not for the young to stray, but for the guardians to blink. In Kruger National Park, wild dogs once stole 3 lion cubs from a hidden den. They didn't kill them immediately. Instead, they dragged them back toward the pack, confused by the strange smell, unsure what to do with prey that didn't run. But the mother returned, and she was not alone. Her pride, usually fractious, prone to rivalry, moved as one. What followed wasn't a fight. It was a lesson. The wild dogs fled, 2 limping, 1 not at all. The cubs were never found, but neither were the dogs seen near that pride again. Strangely, it's often the presence of young that keeps groups together. Lionesses tolerate each other's company mostly because of shared cub rearing. Elephant herds revolve entirely around the care and instruction of calves. Even buffalo, notoriously irritable, will form living barricades to protect their young from predators, encircling them like a breathing fortress, horns out, eyes wide. In fact, it's been observed that buffalo will sometimes rescue calves from other herds entirely, as if some collective oath exists among mothers. No matter whose child it is, none shall be taken without war. Yet nature, ever the prankster, throws in its contradictions. Leopard mothers, among the most protective in the animal kingdom, will stash cubs in treetops, only to lose them to eagles. Giraffes, with their impossibly long necks and gentle eyes, will kick hyenas into the stratosphere if they come too close to a calf, but have also been seen abandoning newborns during stampedes. And then there are the orphaned, those who somehow survive the chaos and must navigate a world written in fangs and rules they've never been taught.
One such orphan, a hippo calf named in local law only as Mud Shadow, was spotted for weeks near a watering hole, keeping distance from all pods, feeding alone, moving only at dusk. Most assumed she'd perish, but months later, she was seen again, larger, stronger, and inexplicably accompanied by 2 adult females. No one knew why. Adoption among hippos is rare, but perhaps, in the suffocating heat of the dry season, maternal instincts find strange expression. Because in the end, what makes these baby beasts so dangerous is not their size or their strength, but what they provoke in others. They are not the fighters. They are the reasons others fight. Every bellow, every stampede, every tusk lowered in fury is often for something soft, wide-eyed and barely taller than the grass. The savannah may be ruled by power, but it is moved by vulnerability. And somewhere, under a canopy of stars and rising mist, a lioness curls herself around her cubs, tail flicking in rhythm with their breathing. She dozes with one eye open, because even in dreams, she is a weapon. And in this world, the cost of love is always written in blood. But now, as we look beyond the land and toward the future, a new player looms. Not clawed or horned, but curious, invasive, and armed with tools. In our final chapter, we leave the beasts behind and turn our gaze inward. The sun rises the same way it always has, with a golden hush that spills across the savannah, draping trees in amber light and stirring dust into motion. Herds begin their pilgrimage to distant water, vultures rise in thermal spirals, and lions stretch their limbs under the cool shade of umbrella thorns. The illusion, at first glance, is one of timelessness. A wild world still intact, still running on the rhythms of tooth and claw. But look closer, and cracks begin to appear. Faint lines etched into the horizon. A road, a fence, a lodge. A drone buzzes faintly in the distance. A vehicle idles, air-conditioned and idly curious. The giants are still here, yes? But the kingdom they once ruled without question has new architects, and the apex predator wears shoes. Across Africa's wilderness, something fundamental is shifting. The great beasts still clash. Elephants still charge. Hippos still maim. Rhinos still duel under clouds of dust. But around them, the chessboard has been reshuffled.
Territories once stretching across thousands of kilometers are now parceled by wire and road. Seasonal migrations are blocked by railways. Mating grounds echo with engine growls. And watering holes, once dangerous democratic spaces of survival, are now padded with security cameras and solar lights. In this altered arena, survival is not dictated solely by instinct or strength, but increasingly by proximity to humans. Fencing, introduced with the intention of conservation and containment, has become a double-edged sword. While it shields wildlife from poachers and defines the boundaries of protected parks, it also fractures ecosystems. Elephants, with their encyclopedic memories, still walk ancient migration routes. Only now they reach dead ends. Herds pace the edges of electric barriers, confused and agitated, unable to reach food sources remembered from generations past. Rhinos, territorial and solitary, are crammed into shrinking ranges where violence becomes inevitable. And apex predators, once free to stalk and disperse prey across entire valleys, now hunt in crowded reserves, their presence shifting the behavior of every creature around them in unnatural ways. But perhaps the cruelest twist comes from the very species that claims to be protecting them. Poaching, a shadow industry fed by international demand, has changed the way giants move, mate, and defend. Rhinos, hunted for their keratin-rich horns, falsely believed to cure ailments or symbolize status, now give birth in secret, constantly on the move. Some calves never learn to socialize. Others grow up motherless, the bond severed by a gunshot echoing through the bush at night. Even elephants, revered in myth and adored by tourists, are not safe. Matriarchs have been found with tusks hacked out crudely, their calves circling in confusion. In areas of high poaching pressure, young males orphaned too early have been observed forming aggressive gangs, attacking tourists, killing rhinos, and disrupting entire habitats, a phenomenon known as young male syndrome. These are not simply behavioral issues. These are psychological scars etched into species that grieve, remember, and learn. Tourism, too, carries its paradox. On one hand, it funds conservation, creates jobs, and fosters appreciation for the wild. On the other, it compresses nature into performance. Animals become photo ops. A lioness giving birth must do so within view of a jeep convoy. A cheetah must chase not only her prey, but the drone buzzing above her head. Habituation follows, a soft erosion of fear. Predators lose their wariness of humans. Prey lose their edge. In some areas, leopards have been seen strolling past vehicles, ignoring humans entirely. It seems harmless, even thrilling, until the leopard begins to associate villages with easy access to livestock. Until a hyena crosses a resort fence and snatches a child, until retaliation follows. Then there is the creeping fog of urban expansion. Towns swell at the park borders. Lights blur the stars. Cell towers rise where vultures once nested. The great beasts find themselves boxed in, not by rivers or rivalries, but by us. A hippo walks into a hotel lobby during flood season. An elephant tramples a maize field desperate for something green. The retaliation comes not with tusks, but with bullets. Conservationists must now negotiate with communities, not just poachers. Wild animals are no longer just wildlife. They are perceived threats to property, to livelihoods, to safety. And what of the younger generation of these giants? The calves and cubs that once inherited territories shaped by flood, fire, and tooth. They now inherit a puzzle. Elephant calves grow up within electric fences, never learning to roam. Rhino calves are dehorned at birth, a desperate act of mercy to save them from being slaughtered later. Some hippo calves live their entire lives within man-made dams, never knowing what it means to swim a river swollen with rain. Yet even amid this fracturing, the wild finds its strange moments of rebellion. In a private game reserve, an elderly elephant bull, thought to have been pacified by years of exposure to tourists, suddenly turned and destroyed a luxury safari vehicle, no provocation given. In Kruger, a pride of lions took over a golf course during lockdown, sprawled across greens like royalty reclaiming old land. And in a bizarre twist in Zimbabwe, a dehorned rhino fought off a pride of lions that had cornered her calf, using only her body and rage. She survived. So did the calf. These stories remind us that while the giants are pressured, they are not broken. They adapt, sometimes clumsily, sometimes magnificently. But make no mistake, we are altering them. Their bodies are the same. Their spirits are shifting. They are becoming creatures of two worlds, half wild, half watched. And in doing so, We too are shifting. No longer distant observers, no longer separate from nature's stage. We are now part of the cast, for better or worse. So are they still apex predators? Or have they been demoted, not by fang or failure, but by our interference? The answer may lie not in their power, but in ours, in what we choose to fence, protect, exploit, or restore. Because in this new world, the most dangerous creature may not be the one with the largest tusks, but the one holding the map, the money, and the drone controller. The giants still walk, but now every step they take echoes with our choices. And in the silence that follows, one question lingers in the tall grass, rustling like a whisper. Will we be remembered as their protectors, or the reason they disappeared?